Hello, welcome to my tour. My name is Kushi and I'm an 18-year-old A-level student from London. I study sociology, geography and maths, which is ironic because I'm quite a creative person and the subjects I study at the moment may suggest otherwise. I've been doing art for as long as I can remember in many forms. Painting, sketching and illustration, and of course, photography. Photography has always been one of my favorite creative outlets. I've always been praised for my analytical abilities and observant eye. I'm drawn to landscape photography the most, but I'm also keen on learning portraiture in the future, as I aim to travel and make even more content, in hopes to refine my skills and keep learning. Here are some of my photographs on the screen. Although I'm passionate about creativity and photography, I've unfortunately never been taught professionally, which is why I'm constantly looking for different ways to improve my work and work outside of my comfort zone, to try and allow my skills to grow and develop. This is why, when I was approached with the opportunity by Girls Network to work with Teen Tours, I simply couldn't say no. The exhibition is about Evgenia Avgura's work, Hyperborea, Stories from the Russian Arctic. Her photographs initially stood out to me because of their whimsical nature and their ability to make the viewer believe that they are looking at an image from another world. The heavy and interesting contrast between the use of colours in some images and the straight lack of colours in others also drew me in. The imagery almost felt alien, as if it were from a distant planet. Her collection showcases her travels through the Russian Arctic as she documents her homeland's iconic nature, rare environment, extraordinary people, and breathtaking beauty. Her work is set out in 4 different chapters, almost like a story in itself. Dixon, a collection of photographs from a former industrial town, which have now been abandoned by its people, and has experienced the Aurora Borealis. The Weatherman, which showcases photos of Slava, a lone geographer who lives alone in the Russian Arctic as a weatherman, with nothing but a parrot to keep him company. There's Kanin Nos and Chetkotka. I'll be going into more details about these photographs later. Evgenia is from a port city called Tiksi, but she now lives here in London. Her photography is a tool that she uses to remain connected to her birthplace and homeland. I was drawn to her work for its ability to make the viewer ask questions in the attempt to figure out more and to piece together a backstory from her photographs, making us wonder why and what the story behind her work truly is. This is why, as we continue with the exhibition today and her work is introduced to you, I urge you not only to take on the role of a viewer or a mere observer, but rather the role of a reader, asking questions and in some sense, reading on to find out more. Aurora Borealis. The first image I would like to present to you is the image of the Aurora Borealis dancing above the town Dixon. This is one of my favorite pictures in the exhibition. Its bold use of color is absolutely uncanny. The Aurora Borealis, also known as the Northern Lights, were once believed by the Vikings to be a bridge between Earth and Asgard, which would connect them to the mythical gods better known as Thor or Odin. Of course, this myth was discarded, and the event is now known as a natural phenomenon, which is caused by charged particles from the sun striking atoms in the Earth's atmosphere. I know, I prefer the first explanation about Asgard too, but you can blame science for that. This natural spectacle is so rare that Evgenia and her brother waited almost 3 whole weeks before it appeared. In an interview, she expressed how, as time went on, her and her brother grew increasingly impatient and hopeless, slowly abandoning the hope that they'd get to bear witness to the phenomenon that they traveled so far to see. Of course, the Northern Lights did eventually appear, proving Evgenia's patience fruitful. After 3 weeks of waiting, she managed to get all her pictures of the Aurora Borealis within just 3 hours. This beautiful image showcases how the blue and green light gently encompasses the abandoned town of Dixon and dyes the otherwise blank canvas of the snow a deep sea blue. The soft lines of the aurora painted in the sky seem almost free-moving and liberated as they seem to be dancing carelessly, perhaps as a means to mock the rigid structure of the forgotten buildings below, as they remain stubbornly planted and anchored to the ground, unmoving despite life continuing around them. This heavy and dramatic contradiction perhaps shows the polar opposite personalities of humankind and nature. While one is stubborn and solid, the other dances freely in a place where humans cannot even think to reach. I think the reason why this is one of my favorite photographs in the collection is because of its meaningful backstory of determination and having faith that things will work out good in the end, even if the wait is long and painful. It is a perfect example that proves the quote, "All good things come to those who wait." Piano photo. This photo is set in the same location as the previous one, Dixon, the most northernmost town, which was abandoned by its population. It was known as a town at the edge of Earth, as there was simply nothingness beyond this point. Citizens were sent here to live and work, with the initial intention to populate the area permanently. However, when Dixon's industrial usefulness decreased, so did its population, leaving behind only a mere 300 residents. Although a weather station remained, people had little reason to stay, and very few members of the younger population saw any future in Dixon. The mass migration led to former homes being quickly abandoned and left vacant, as you saw in the previous image of the Aurora Borealis. This photograph shows the inside of one of these abandoned homes. A broken window and a decaying piano are the center of it. To some extent, the light of the Aurora Borealis forces itself in through the broken window, signifying the strength and determination of nature over mankind. To me, it is almost as if nature is trying to take over what humans once owned and claim it as its own again. Arguably, the most prominent part of the photograph is a piano, which may make you initially imagine merriful sounds and cheerful tunes being played. But although the focus of the piano is a musical instrument, the image ironically has a silent, eerie, but calming tone to it, which may represent the emptiness of the town, now that most of the people have migrated and left the town to rot away. And much like the town itself, the piano is left to decay as well. It is clear that the wooden exteriors of the piano have vanished and have left behind a skeletal-like structure, almost like a rib cage or a structure of bones, creating imagery of a lifeless carcass left to decompose. Okay, so what can you see in this image? If you have any ideas, you can unmute yourself or type in the comments. So some of you have said you can see people, a lighthouse, and lots of snow. Okay. And some of you can see heavy snowfall. Okay. So, all right, everyone, stop squinting. This photograph is as clear as is meant to be. When I first saw this picture, I found myself waiting for it to load up properly on my computer for a good minute, because of course, everything is virtual now. After a few seconds of heavy waiting, I realized that my eyes were in fact fine, and the photograph was set in a thick snowstorm. The lack of clarity in this image proves the viewer's sense of sight absolutely useless, and makes us question what senses we can rely on to help us navigate the area and environment around us, forcing us to emphasize with the two figures in the image, in the right region of the photograph. We are forced not only to see everything through forced to only see everything through a blurred filter, much like how the couple in the image must be experiencing the area around them. The couple in the image are called Evgenia, which is the same name as Evgenia Avgera, the photographer, and Ivan, who live alone in one of the only lighthouses in the Arctic, in a town called Kalinos, which is a whole 17-hour snowmobile ride away from the nearest village. They only have their dog, Dragon, and each other to keep them company. When you think of the name Dragon, you immediately think of heat and warmth. Because of their dog's name, I find this incredibly ironic, and it's almost as if they have named him as a means to remain connected to a source of heat in a spiritual way, even though they may find it hard to do so physically because of their geographical location. The heavy sense of survival is what initially drew me to this image. When you think of survival, you often think of an abundance of supplies, and perhaps even a team of people to keep you company. Ironically, this image doesn't show any of that. All it has is a thick snowstorm, a couple of people, and a place to call home. This is why it makes you, as the reader, ask yourself, what would I need to survive? Furthermore, my favorite part of this image is the brightest part, the center yellow light emitting a vivid, bright light towards you as if it was charging at you through the screen. This light seemed to represent hope and warmth, which would perhaps help the couple get through the harsh temperatures around them. I'd like to introduce you to Slava Korotky. Just like the couple in the previous image, the weatherman Slava lives alone, monitoring the geography around him. The biggest similarity I noticed between Slava and Ivan and Evgenia is that they both keep pets. While the couple have a dog to perhaps remind them of warmth, Slava keeps a pet parrot, which seemed incredibly fitting to me. This is because parrots mimic humans and speak like humans to a certain extent. It is almost as if living alone in the Russian Arctic, Slava is attempting to remain connected to humans through his parrot. Keeping a parrot may have taken the place of any human life in his life, which would have kept him company. Slava has actually been living there for 13 whole years and works as a weatherman. This is my favorite picture of him from Evgenia's work. He stands still in the lake, as if the water keeps his legs anchored. He quietly holds a measuring stick, which to me seemed almost unsettling, as it is held upside down, perhaps symbolizing a countdown on a timer, which personally makes me feel uncomfortable, as it may represent the countdown to the end of Slava's life, or perhaps the countdown warning us as the viewer and reminding us that we don't have much time to help our climate, which is a lot of what Evgenia's work is focused on. This correlates to Slava's still stance. The lack of urgency and his calm nature perhaps alludes to the idea that he's giving up on the hope that the environment can be saved. He faces away from us, away from the camera, looking towards the horizon, where a couple of large forms can be seen. Initially, I was completely convinced that this was a large ship, and to me this would have been symbolic of the possibility that perhaps Slava is looking out towards the ship as a means to reach out to other humans, to perhaps salvage any human connection he may have around him. However, upon closer inspection, I realized that it is only a large mass of ice, which may represent how, despite all his efforts to remain connected to the human race, all that surrounds him is more nature and more cold ice. Despite this, the amount of ice shown in the horizon makes the viewer worried, as our attention is drawn to the negative space of the image. Perhaps Evgenia does this deliberately as a means to document the changing climate around us. Evgenia describes Slava's weather station as being frozen in time. I know, her choice of words is incredibly ironic and fitting. Although his surroundings seem to be from a completely different era, as his wallpapers crumble off the walls and he holds an image of Yuri Gagarin from 1961, Evgenia mentions feeling a sense of comfort around him. Evgenia has questioned him about whether he is actually content with his state of living, to which he responds positively and mentions all of the different natural spectacles he gets to witness every day because of his job. Overall, Slava seems to be perfectly happy with his life alone in the Arctic. However, I struggle to believe this, especially with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. With so many of us having to physically isolate ourselves from each other, it is almost impossible to comprehend how someone who is not only physically isolated, but also socially marginalized from any real form of human connection may be able to thrive in an environment that is so harsh and cold all alone. Especially as the only time Slava speaks to another human being is when relaying geographical data through an old-fashioned radio via Morse code. He does this multiple times a day, repetitively and religiously, muttering to himself, wind south, southwest, wind south, southwest. It is almost as if his geography has become his language. For this next image, I'd like you to comment what you see in this photo. Oh. So a lot of you are saying that you can see matches and a watchtower. One of you said you can see a graph and shadows. Okay. Is there anything else? A notebook? A landscape? Okay. This next picture is of a small tower of matches made by Slava. He is known to do this often to keep himself busy between collecting data and relaying it to a blind ear at the other end of his radio. In this image, the matchsticks stand tall and proud as one collective structure, perhaps signifying unity, which slightly differs to Slava's circumstances as he is all alone. Initially, I believed that the structure embodied a home. I thought that this was a way for Slava to remain connected to his home, wherever that may be. And although the structure was clearly a fake made of mere thin pieces of wood, perhaps to Slava it seemed real and gave him a sense of moral support. This was supported by the solid shadows in the background, which make it absolutely impossible to tell whether the object outlined in the shadows is a real or a fake. Alternatively, after staring at the photograph for a while, I realized that the match structure resembled more a watchtower than a home, which one of you said in the comments. With its tall shape and obvious windows to perhaps view from, it is almost as if, despite all his efforts to remain connected to his home, Slava cannot help but conform back to the nature of his job, keeping guard and simply watching as the area around him changes and time passes by. The idea of time escaping is evident because of the stopwatch next to the tower. Its presence almost looms over and makes us, as the viewers, feel slightly uncomfortable. Evgenia's work seems like it has been taken out of an actual storybook. With its poetic characters and dramatic setting, especially with the first image I showed you, which is my favorite, of the Aurora Borealis, which seems uncanny and if it is a snapshot taken from a foreign planet. As we approach the end of today's exhibition, I'd like to ask you to ask yourself the following questions. What do we need as humans to survive? And what things in life are absolutely essential? If you have any ideas, comment them in the chat. So one of you said company, hugs, community. What kind of things would you need if you were like alone? What would you take with you? And what would you need to survive? Creativity, a place to be. A lifetime supply of tea, food and shelter. A colouring book and coffee. Spending the past 6 weeks studying Evgenia's work in great detail and empathy forced me to ask myself these questions, and I would encourage you to ask yourself the same. Unlike the people shown in her work, thankfully, we don't have to find ourselves living in extreme climates, but we may often find ourselves in periods of isolation, especially with the ongoing pandemic. So it is important to stay grateful for the things we can be grateful for and appreciate the warmth we have around us. I would like to thank Remy for helping me put together this talk and for introducing me to Evgenia's work. And I would like to thank all of you for coming and listening to my exhibition today. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.
I'll just jump in, not for a question, but just to say, hopefully we can all give a virtual absolute round of applause because that was so stunning. Kushi, you've done such a fantastic job. Really interesting perspective. It was absolutely lovely. All the comments, thank you, well done, thanks so much. You were great, well done. What a great presentation, such a brilliant talk. Thank you for a great talk. Really, really engaging. And you kind of wove it like a story in the same way that you spoke about how Evgenia did it. So just absolutely wonderful. Does anyone have any questions? It would be lovely to kind of hear from you if you want to know anything more. Don't be
I
shy.
do. Can I ask a question? Kushi, thank you so much. You've got an incredible way with words. It's like poetry. Sometimes just listening to you and the vocabulary really brought the work even further alive for me. And I
Thank
guess you're welcome. What a pleasure. I just wanted to ask, you're studying geography and sociology as well as math.
you.
And it felt like you were drawing on those somehow to put your talk together. And I'm really excited that you're also interested in creative subjects. I just wondered if this work inspired you. You mentioned travel and your interest in traveling. Did it inspire you at all to think about either working or traveling to the Arctic, or had you thought about that before?
So I've always been like interested in going to see the Northern Lights, once in my life at least. I feel like this exhibition and like studying Evgenia's work, it kind of motivated me and inspired me even further, and kind of solidified that kind of aspiration on my bucket list, kind of. So yeah, I will definitely hope to see the Northern Lights at least once.
Fantastic. I hope you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions? You can always put them in the chat if you'd rather not go on camera. Let's see. Do you have a favorite project of hers, says Kate?
I think Evgenia's The Weatherman section was my favorite, just because like she really draws in on Slava's emotions, even though we don't hear him say anything. And I think she spent quite a few weeks with him, photographing him. So I feel like that everything she learned and like the relationship she built with him really comes through in that. And yeah.
Brilliant. Any others? Such good thought out answers. I'm just so impressed. Really wonderful. Another one from Zainab. Is there anything specific that made you drawn to her work? That's a good question.
I think again, because I love travel and I've always been interested in the Northern Lights. I think that first image of the Aurora Borealis is what initially drew me to her work and what kind of attracted me in the first place. And I feel like her like use of colors is really interesting. How she like completely strips all the color away in some images, and other ones like the piano picture are so filled with all these vibrant colors. I feel like that contradiction really seemed appealing to me.
It's not really a question, but I just thought it was really interesting how you kind of made reference to what the time we're living in now, and how there's quite a lot of similarities there, and it really makes us think about how we feel about isolation and yeah, what's important to us. And I just think that's such a nice connection to that. So yeah, well done.
There's one more question from Kelly, who says, what do you think is the most common theme throughout her projects? And if you could ask her a question, what would it be? That's great.
I think there are a few themes I think we touched on like throughout the 6 weeks. I think one of them is the sense of being alone and being content with being alone. I think that and like that kind of goes hand in hand with community, because they're like polar opposites, but they kind of correlate with each other. I think yeah, those, and I think also environment, because Evgenia's work definitely is documentary style, so it focuses on like the problems that her homeland is experiencing at the moment. So that's like really important, I think, in her pictures as well. So yeah.
And if you could ask her a question, what would it be?
I think if she could go back and, you know, have all the population come back and go back in time and also back geographically to her hometown, I think I would ask her, what would you want to change and what would you want to keep the same? Yes.
That's a great question. Hold on to it. Maybe next time you go, you'll bump into her and you can actually ask those questions. One more question. Has her photography inspired you to create similar artwork, such as sketches or paintings? That's from Krisha.
I think for me, when I think of a piece of art, I always thought of vibrant colors and like colors that pop. I think looking at her work kind of made me realize that art doesn't always have to be colorful. It can be black and white as well. And it's funny because she doesn't actually like make her pictures black and white, like in post, like editing and everything. They just kind of are the way they are, and I feel like there's a certain beauty in that. And I hope to like take everything I've learned throughout these 6 weeks and put it, like apply it to my work as well in the future. So yeah.
Fantastic. I'm just aware of time, so unless there are any more questions, I'd just like to again thank Kushi so much for such a well thought out, beautifully wrought talk. It's absolutely fantastic.